Hi, welcome back to the Woodshop Nerdery. In this video, I continue the project build on the Hans Wegner folding chair, otherwise known as model JH512. I'll be taking the templates I made in last video and begin sizing and shaping my work pieces. This project is really kicking my butt. I wanted a difficult project and boy did I pick one. Stick around and I'll show you some of the troubles I've been having. Okay, I have most of the pieces I need rough cut out on the bandsaw, almost ready for the next step, except for one. I'm missing one of the longer chair legs / backrest pieces. And the only lumber I have left is this pile of scraps, none of which are big enough to accommodate the full size of that template. So what I've done is pick two of the largest pieces of scraps here. As you can see, even if I go all the way into the corner, I can't sneak this piece on. It's hanging off. So instead of buying a new piece of lumber, what I've decided I'm going to do is joint these two boards together and then cut the template out from the glued up boards. And if I get a good joint here, the glue will be super strong anyway. So there's really nothing to worry about. Okay, so here are my two scrap pieces glued together and I have the pattern traced out here. So now I just need to make a rough cutout here on the bandsaw. Okay, I've got the laminations started here. I can only do two at a time because the boards have somewhat of a warp in them. And I want to make sure that at least when they're clamped up to something flat to mitigate some of the warping. You can see I've used quite a few of my clamps already. And then down here I had to get creative because the reach required to get around this curve is pretty severe. And boy, am I glad I have these hand screw clamps. These have come in really handy on several occasions. I think I'm going to buy a couple more of these 20-inch ones. I have my final set of glue laminations setting up on the bench behind me. I've done this procedure in a little bit different order. I did not plane one side, then thickness plane the other side, then cut out my shapes like maybe we normally would. What I did instead is I just went ahead and cut out my shapes first. Then I used this 5.5 jack plane to true up just the faces that I would be gluing together. Now that doesn't mean I'm making those perfectly flat. I'm just making a consistent surface on one side of both pieces, even if they have a little bit of a bow into it, because when I clamp them down to my bench, the faces will set up flat within the plane of my bench and be stuck there by the glue. So the reason I'm doing this a little bit differently is because to get these curved pieces to fit, I had to buy the widest boards I could. That means the lumber I bought had a lot of cups and twists. So to illustrate that, I have this board and I've hashed out marks here where you would typically see high spots or a cup. Sure, I could joint those down and then turn the piece over. Eventually, after you take those off, what you end up with is a much thinner piece. And if I'm not really using this corner or this corner because of the curve of my piece, I can lay these out, cut them out on the bandsaw, and then just true up one side. So far it's working pretty well. But while these are setting up, I'm going to take advantage of the time to take care of this problem over here, which is this big scrap pile. Here are the rest of the laminations waiting for me to template route these to shape. And then here's this goofy scrap pile. As you can see, these curved pieces create a lot of weird shapes. And this is a lot of lumber. I do not want to just pitch it. On the other hand, I don't want to store these weird shapes here in my garage forever. So I think what I'm going to do is take the shapes like this and set the fence on my bandsaw to about 2.5 inches and just rip these down and square them up into something that will be usable and much easier to store. I frequently use scraps of wood that are about 2 to 3 inches wide and 4 to 5 inches long. They're great for calls or setup blocks and things like that. So here are all the pieces I was able to salvage out of that stack of wood. Lots of good usable stuff here. I'm sure I'll use that in the future. Then over here in the trash, here is the stuff I didn't bother salvaging. The pieces were just too weird shaped or too curved or too thin. And I'd say this is about half of the total I've thrown away. In last week's garbage there was a pile similar to this. So unfortunately, a project with a lot of curved pieces like this just has a lot of waste. Okay, so I have the Shopsmith set up here in under table routing mode. I have my dust collector / guard set up here. I've got an 1.5 inch flush trim bit with a 1/2 inch shank. My plan was to do template routing. So I would double stick tape this template to the top here so that the bearing on the router bit would follow along the template and size and shape my work pieces to the size of the template. However, it's not going to work. Even if I break this into quadrants where I'm routing in this direction, then this direction, then I put the template on the other side and then route this direction and this direction, so I'm always going downhill the slope and theoretically with the grain, it still is a massive problem. Some of these work pieces have some pretty wild grain, but that's not really the issue. The issue is that I've laminated these together. So at different points, I have different directions of grain in each individual board. So for example, at this point, it'll cut smoothly on this board, but at this point, it'll grab and tear out because I'm going against the grain. And that's just an aspect of laminating these pieces together that I didn't consider in my planning stage. So then I thought what I would do is trace the line of the template right onto the workpiece and then use my spoke shaves to work down to the line. But we have the same problem as with the router. The blade of the spoke shave is going to be going into the grain or with the grain at different points on the different boards. My next attempt was to go ahead and take my rasp, and yes, I'm able to work these pieces down no problem. This is working, but it is really time consuming. And I've got a lot of work pieces here to do because I'm building 2 chairs. And the other thing is that this Shinto rasp creates almost as much sawdust as a power tool. It's nothing like a typical rasp, which, yeah, it creates dust, but really a lot more just chips. And then shavings with hand tools like this, I mean, you can see the pile of sawdust on the few pieces I tried. I mean, it looks like I almost came in here with a sander or a table saw blade or something. There's no dust collection really to speak of. So using this tool in a prolonged manner, like I would have to do to get all of those work pieces shaved down and all of those work pieces shaved down, I would definitely want to be wearing a mask, because that's just putting a lot of dust around. So given the competing grain direction situation with my laminations, abrasives are my best option. I could have used the disc sander for this operation, but the belt sander is going to have some advantages. First, I have all these pieces to do, and if that grit starts to wear out on that sanding belt, it is so much easier to change the sanding belt than it is to change the disc on the disc sander. And 2, there's just a lot more material here, so the sandpaper will last longer than on the disc. And 3, I just think the dust collection on this belt sander is just amazing. And since I'm going to be doing a lot of sanding, I want to use the best dust collection I can. Okay, so that's working quite well. That side's done. And I have to say, that's probably a more consistent finish than I was able to achieve by the hand tools anyway. Obviously for the inside curves, I won't be able to use the belt sander. I'll have to switch over to the drum sander on the Mark 7. I know I made a big deal about the different grain directions in the laminations and not being able to use the spoke shave, but there are some situations where this board here is significantly taller than the one on the right. So that means I can quickly take it down with the spoke shave before I have to go over and hit it with the sander. So that's been working pretty well. Here's an example where one side's a little higher than the other. So I could take several strokes on this side without touching this side and digging into this other grain. Notice as the plane bottoms out onto this other piece, it all of a sudden starts to chatter. That's because it's got a competing grain direction to this side here. It is much faster to hog this off with the spoke shave than to take 10 or 12 passes on the drum sander to get these two boards level. The method I'm using to hand plane one side of each board and then clamp them to the bench to join them together is working out really well. All the seams in these laminations are super tight and super clean. No gaps. I am really happy with how this is turning out so far. Well, that does it for this woodshop nerdery video. I did want to give you more in this video. I wanted to get all the sizing and shaping done, but man, is it taking forever. As a hobbyist, I just don't have the amount of time to commit to the garage in order to build this kind of project quickly. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing and join me in the next video where I continue work on the chairs. Bye.